Our guest is Ronny Robertson, a former Alabama linebacker who joined Frank Taylor Advertising right out of school. And in 1975 and 1976, while working for Frank Taylor Advertising, he helped produce the Bear Bryant Show right at the height of its popularity. Ronny, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, Tommy.
And I will say, Ronny was my boss in the Crimson Tide Foundation. And what a great boss he was. He kept us in stitches all the time. And I miss seeing him every day.
Well, thank you. The feeling's mutual here. And you may have given me the title of boss, but I never felt like you worked for me. I felt like I was working with you.
Well, same here.
Well,
Rick?
Ronny, I've been excited for this conversation. Tommy speaks so highly of you, and I'm looking forward to us having some fun together. So I just want to start at the beginning. So you played for Coach Bryant, and then you joined Frank Taylor Advertising, which was the agency that produced the show. How did that opportunity come about to join Frank Taylor Advertising and then to be part of that account and to be part of producing the show?
Well, Rick, I should first, before I answer that question, I should have said hello to you too, and thank you for welcoming me to the podcast here. But
listen, I'm just the window dressing around here. Tommy's the show. I just happen to get to ride along on his coattails.
I hear you. Well, I'm going to give you the long version, but the long version is not that long. Tommy will remember this, but my senior year, Coach Bryant brought in a new linebacker coach, Paul Crane. Paul Crane had been an All-American at Alabama and had played linebacker, and he was my linebacker coach my senior year. So after I got out of school, I had a degree from the School of Journalism in Advertising and Public Relations. So I thought I might want to try to get into that field. And Coach Crane said, you ought to go to work for a guy that I work for. And I said, who is that? And he said, Mr. Frank Taylor Advertising in Birmingham. So I sort of played around with it. And I talked to some insurance companies and I talked to some other people, and nothing worked out. And finally, about, I think, June, after I'd left the university, I called Coach Crane and I said, hey, do you think I could go talk to Mr. Taylor? And he said, yeah, I think he'd love it. So anyway, I had moved back to Chattanooga, where I was from at the time. My parents were living on Signal Mountain outside of Chattanooga. And I got in the car and drove to Birmingham and interviewed with Mr. Taylor. Of course, he had a linebacker from Alabama. He had produced the Coach Bryant show from day one. And he was thrilled to have the opportunity to have another former player to be associated with his agency and particularly the show. I think probably the show had a lot of, it just gave meat to the show when he talked about it. I never was on camera. I never did do any speaking or anything else, but I think it just pleased him to have a former player around and on the staff. And so he offered me the job and I took it and we went from there. The reason Frank Taylor got the Coach Bryant show, when Coach Bryant came in 1958, he wanted to do a show, and I don't know whether, Tommy, you might research this, but I don't know whether he had done a show at Texas A&M or not, but he wanted to do a TV show. And he and Mr. Frank Taylor were classmates at Alabama. And Mr. Frank Taylor told the story this way. Mr. Taylor was prematurely gray. He was gray-headed in college. And he said, I was sort of an oddity. And he said, Paul was an oddity because he was so dadgum big. He said he was a foot taller than everybody else. And he said, we sort of bonded because we were sort of oddballs, and he said, so we became good friends. So when Coach Bryant came back to Alabama, somebody mentioned, hey, Frank Taylor Advertising. And so he called Mr. Taylor and he said, you're in the advertising business. I want to have a TV show. Can you handle it? And of course, Mr. Taylor had 5 clients at the time. Now listen to who those were. Golden Flake, Coca-Cola. That's where Great Pear says the bear. Mr. Taylor came up with that line, but 2 of our 5 clients were Coca-Cola, Golden Flake. then we had Red Diamond Coffee, and then we had Ziegler's Meat Packing. And Coach Bryant was associated with three of them. And so it was sort of like having Coach Bryant's advertising agency in Birmingham. And the fifth one was Jim Burt Buick.
I was going to say the fourth one and the fifth one wanted to be associated with Coach Bryant, right?
That's exactly right. And they were. I mean, he helped them out.
Well, you know, you had a really special perspective in seeing Coach Bryant both as a player and as an on-camera personality. What
Right.
was he like in the studio environment? How did he handle that?
Well, I knew that was going to come up, and I was reflecting on this when Tommy called me the other day. But it was amazing how he transitioned. You always had respect for him, and you never lost that ever. But you weren't as fearful of him because he broke down and he let you inside his circle, and he would crack jokes or he would say this and say that. And it wasn't like, oh gosh, Coach Bryant's in the room. But yeah, and then there again, it was, hey, Coach Bryant's in the studio. We got to get our act together, you know. But the difference between being a player for him and working for him really, I guess you'd say it sort of de-iced after I got on the staff there. And he would tell me jokes and whatever, and that's sort of a segue into the photograph I was mentioning earlier. But my job, well, I actually had three jobs associated with the show, and two of them gave me the opportunity to make extra money because I could get paid on Saturday and Sunday. I could get paid a salary for working a little bit extra salary. I wasn't on an hourly basis, but I was on the crew for the Saturday crew and the Sunday crew for Coach Bryant's TV show. So on Saturday, I was the sideline photographer, and I had an old 8mm wind up camera. It didn't even have batteries in it. You had to keep the spring wound up. And I had a thing I wore around my waist, and it was a brace, and it was made out of aluminum. It was real light, and the camera was up here. And I would carry that thing around and film the sidelines. And then Sunday morning at 7 a.m., we had to be at WBRC. It changed. I think we were at WBRC television studios. They were both up there on Red Mountain. It was WBRC and then WAPI and what was the other one? But I think it was WBRC is where we filmed the show when I did it. And we would be up there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is no joke. We had the reels on those mounts, and we were spinning the tape and looking at it through like a viewfinder. And we'd get to the point where, you know, Richard Todd threw a great pass and Rush Shamoon caught it. And I had Rush Shamoon coming toward me on the sidelines. Well, we would stop the tape, and then we would get mine over here and view it, and we would splice it. And it was spliced with like Scotch tape. And we would do that together. And that's the way, and we had to have that ready by, we usually recorded about 11:30. So we had about 4 hours to get the tape ready. And sometimes, sometimes, hey, we got 2 minutes and we got to finish this thing. And we'd go in there and we didn't know whether we had spliced it strong enough. On occasion, it would break and we'd go to a commercial break, but not very often. But sometimes it just happened because it was so animated the way we were doing it.
Is that why they called it a break, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Whenever the film broke, you had to stop.
But look, this is what I wanted to show you. I don't know whether this will show it. Can you see that? There you go. You see that? Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
That's the one I was talking about, Ronnie.
That is me. That's back when I had hair. But look at that camera. That's the 8mm camera, and that's what I had when I filmed the sidelines. But let me tell you the story about this picture. This is the first year that I was on the sidelines. And Coach Bryant, this is at Legion Field. And it was iconic that Coach Bryant went and stood underneath the goalpost, pregame. And everybody couldn't wait for him to walk out of the dressing room and go stand underneath the goalpost. Well, this was one of the games. This wasn't the first game of the season because that year we played Missouri in Birmingham, and Missouri beat us. But this was a subsequent game, and I don't remember who it was. For some reason, I think it may have been Tennessee, but I'm not sure. And so I'm just down on the sidelines. I'm getting ready to go to work because I got to film the game. And so I'm down on the sidelines pre-game, and I'm talking to some of the coaches or some of the players. They had been my teammates the year before. And all of a sudden, I'm down in that corner where the home team dressing room was, and Coach Bryant walks out with that red suit on and that houndstooth, and he sees me, and he walks straight toward me, but he never stopped. And he got about 3 or 4 feet from me, and he said, "Ronnie," he said, "come on down here under the goalpost with me and get your picture made with me." He said, "Every photographer in America is going to be taking my picture." And so I wasn't going to tell Coach Bryant no. So I just walked down there with him, and we got to the goalpost, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and they started. It sounded like a young war going off. There were so many cameras clicking. It was unbelievable. And
so
one
cool.
guy, Tommy, you'll remember, and Rick, you may, Calvin, he was a photographer for the Tuscaloosa News.
Calvin Hanna.
That's exactly right. Calvin Hanna
Yeah.
took this photograph, and he sent me, he said, "Would you like a copy of it?" And I said, "Would I like a copy of it? I mean, I'd love it." So anyway,
fantastic.
that was the first job I had with the show. And then the second job I had, well, I've already talked about the second one. The first one was to film the sidelines the day of the game. I went on all the road trip games, out of town games. Of course, we did them all, so I had to go on those too. Sometimes we never flew with the team. We always had we'd either drive or Mr. Taylor would rent a plane, I think. But most of the time we drove, and a lot of times we wouldn't get back till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then we'd have to go up at 7 and start splicing. It was full time. I'd film, come back and splice, and then time to record, time to film. Well, Mr. Taylor wanted me, and Paul Crane had told me this. He said, if you stay there with him, go up for 4 or 5 shows, said he wants somebody to start being the director for the show, and behind the camera. And so anyway, I sort of stood next to him, and he said, "Here, put these earphones on." And he said, "Don't say anything, but just listen to everything I do." And so he was calling the shots and doing this and doing that. And so anyway, I did that for 3 or 4 shows. And, at the first, anybody that watched the show back then, there were 2 silver trays up there on the table. And they would always have a bag of Golden Flake potato chips. One of them was plain, and the other one was whatever they wanted to feature. Cheetos, corn chips, or whatever. And Coach Bryant, Charlie Thornton would always say, "Coach, I'm taking a big old swig of this ice cold Coca-Cola right now." And he said, "It sure would be good to have some Golden Flake potato chips with it." "Well, Charlie, I know I would. Let's get some here." And he'd pull that bag, and potato chips would go everywhere. Well, my job, right after that, Charlie would say, "Well, we'll be back after this commercial break for the first quarter of Alabama versus Southern Miss." And during that break, Mr. Taylor gave me the job. I had to go in there and get all those potato chips off the top of the desk and either put them back in the tray or rake them in a trash can that was right below the desk that you never saw. And he said, "Get that desk cleaned up before we come back to break." So that was my third job that I had with the show.
Ronnie, you mentioned Charlie Thornton, but it was Charlie Thornton and Julie Strauss and a whole crew of people that made it happen. I visited the show in 1977, and did a story on it. There was 5 or 6 camera people like at the game besides you. There was somebody up in the press box and in the end zones, and they had to get all that film together. And you had producers and technicians. And tell us who all made that show happen.
Yeah. Mr. Taylor, of course, was the kingpin, but there were 3 cameras in the press box that were on tripods. And there again, had to keep them wound up, to keep it going. One of them filmed every offensive play, every other one filmed every defensive play, and the other one filmed the whole game. I don't know, Mr. Taylor came up with that. But Tommy, that was Ralph Scott. I don't know whether you've talked to Ralph yet. Ralph was the head cameraman, and then his brother, and I can't remember his name, he worked there. And then Larry, I can't remember Larry's last name. But those were the 3 main camera people in the press box. I was on the sidelines, and I would film from the end zone sometime or the sidelines. And then when we went to film the broadcast, the station where we were, WBRC, they had their technicians up there for us they're the ones that were doing the mics, they were doing the lighting, they were rolling the desk in and get it set up. And they probably had 4 or 5 people that were there every Sunday morning when we taped it. So there were probably, and then the girls were there with the script for Charlie and the next play. That was another thing. One of the girls would look at the film and then transcribe it so that Charlie would know, oh, Coach, here comes Richard Todd's pass, for the touchdown. And that was play number 14, or whatever. And so there was a lot of work that went into it. Mr. Frank Taylor and everybody. Well, there's a lot of good memories.
Ronnie, that's amazing. I want to ask, because before I ask you the real question, I just want to ask you something for fun here. So Stedman told us about a story that is kind of in legend about the show, about Coach Bryant, one of his Chesterfields going in the garbage can and lighting things on fire, and him using a Coke to pour it out. I'm just wondering if it was your potato chips in the garbage can that he lit on fire with a Chesterfield. Would you confirm or deny that situation?
I deny it because it didn't happen on my watch.
All right, fair enough. Well, it just when I heard you say the potato chips hit the garbage can, I immediately started putting 2 and 2 together. Well, so families across Alabama, plan our Sundays around that broadcast, and did the production team, when you were part of the team, realize how deeply that show had woven itself into the culture of Alabama families and really families around the South?
I think it did, and it was directly, it followed Coach Bryant's show. Mm-hmm. And every household in Alabama, I'm telling you, at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, they were watching Denny Chimes ring. That's the way we always started the show, with 4 gongs from Denny Chimes and a picture of Denny Chimes. And they would start there, and even most of the Alabama people would watch the Auburn show the next day. And most of the Auburn people would watch Coach Bryant's show beforehand. And Tommy, I can't remember, were they 30 minutes or an hour? I think they started out 30 minutes, and then I think they went to an hour.
In the story I read and wrote 48 years ago, it said that it started out at 30 minutes, but by the mid-'70s, it had gone to an hour. So
that's right.
You're right. It's 1 hour.
That's right. And when I was doing it, it had gone to an hour. So instead of going from 4 to 4:30 and then Shug's show from 4:30 to 5, it now went from 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Because Shug went with an hour as soon as we did. And it was big time.
Well, I wonder, Tommy, you don't happen to know what the rating shares were during those years for either one of those shows, do you?
I'm sure Julie Strauss will tell us when we talk to Ronnie. I'm gonna follow up with a question that we asked Stedman. When you were a player, Did you watch the Bear Bryant Show? And did all your teammates watch it?
Absolutely. For two
Really?
reasons. Yeah. The TV room on the bottom floor at Bryant Hall was packed on Sunday afternoon. And if you were in the dorm, if you were at your girlfriend's sorority house or, somewhere in a house that she had rented with some girls or whatever, you were watching the show. And the reason was, it was twofold. For the people that didn't play in the game or maybe played one or two plays and they knew they didn't mess up or make a great play, they wanted just to get a read on his temperament so we would know what kind of practice we were going to have Monday, because we were all in fear of that. And then the second reason you would watch it is if you made a great play. Oh, Ronny Robertson, he made a great tackle there. Saw his mom and daddy after the game, or if you made a bad play, he would make a comment, but you knew when you went and watched film on Monday that you would go get a lot more than that comment when it rolled around. So everybody, occasionally, I remember one time George Pugh came in. He'd gone to, after the game, he had to go to Montgomery. There was some kind of family emergency or something. And he came back, and he didn't get back in time to watch the program. I remember, that's funny you asked this, Tommy. And George Pugh walked in the TV room at Bryant Hall, and he goes, "Is Coach Bryant's show over?" And we said, "Yeah, George, it's already over." And he said, "Man," he said, "what kind of practice we gonna have tomorrow?" That's why you watched it. And of course, we didn't laugh about it then. Now you do. But right then we say, "Well, I think he's okay." And George said, "Man, I hope so." He said, "I hope so." He said, "We beat him 35 points. You ought to be happy."
Well, it's funny because Stedman said he didn't want to see it. He said it was a 6.5-day-a-week job already, and he was going to see Coach Bryant soon enough. He didn't want to see it. So that's an interesting perspective.
Our group.
Now, Ronny, there had to be some behind-the-scenes moments, challenges, funny stories, crazy things that happened along the way. Help us understand just some of the fun and some of the levity of what it was like being part of that crew.
Well, I can't, the funny, it seemed like it happened every fourth or fifth show, 2 or 3 times during the season. When the show would open, Charlie Thornton would sort of give a brief recap, said, "Coach, it was a beautiful day in Knoxville," said Crimson Tide defeated Tennessee 17-10. It was a close, hard-fought ball game. And what is your perspective on it? And Coach Bryant would start talking about the game. Well, Mr. Taylor had those spots, advertisements for Coca-Cola, Golden Flake, and anybody else that wanted to do one of the other slots. And he had those timed out. So he wanted Coach Bryant to talk 4 minutes and 27 seconds. And then he wanted to cut. Well, Coach Bryant paid no attention to what Mr. Taylor said. And going back to what I said earlier about wearing the headphones and, don't say anything in the mic, about the 8th game of the season, my second year, he said, "Ronny, I want you to produce today's show." So I was sitting there, or direct the show, excuse me. And so I was sitting there, had the headphones on, and Coach Bryant was going over, and Mr. Taylor came over there and he grabbed, and he did like this, like, "Cut it, get him to cut it." And so I walked over there, and Coach Bryant, he had his head cocked like that, how he did. And he was looking around, and all of a sudden I'd walk over here and try to get his eye, and I was going like this. And then I'd walk over here and he'd change his position. And he never paid any attention to me. He never paid any attention to Mr. Taylor. And what we ended up doing, I'm trying to think of the technician, but what we would do, we'd just cut some plays out at the end of the show. We'd fast forward through 3 plays that we were going to show. They weren't, necessarily, touchdowns or big plays or anything. And we would just have to make up for it if he ran over. But any play, I can't recall of anything. I mean, that was sort of an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But the potato chip thing, that happened every show. But that's all I can remember. I know there were some funny stories, but I can't remember exactly what they are.
Ronnie, looking back, how innovative was it that Coach Bryant embraced television so early? I mean, he started that in 1958, and I don't know how popular coaches shows were around the country at that time, but what did that do for the Alabama brand long term? I mean, here we are 50, 60, 70 years later almost, and people still talk about the Bear Bryant Show. I mean,
Well, Tommy, let me ask you this.
theme.
Yeah. In your research, I said that Coach Bryant called Mr. Taylor. I don't know whether it was the first year he was in, but did the show start in 58?
Yes. According to the story I wrote 48 years ago and having interviewed Frank Taylor, yes, it started in 58.
I thought that's what it was. Mr. Taylor told me, I thought I had it right. He said that Coach Bryant called him and he said, I want to do a TV show. But Tommy, what did it do? Well, I think we've already answered that question. I mean, like Rick was talking about, is look what everybody was doing at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon in the state of Alabama. And it just, we didn't have social media. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have anything. And, it was, hey, you went to church on Sunday morning and you went out to eat or came home and ate a big meal and you got ready for Coach Bryant's show. That was part of life.
In most cases,
that brand has continued to grow, obviously. That's why we get
and a lot of our games were not on television. And this was the only chance for our fans to see the highlights.
We didn't play on TV, but I think even my senior year in '75, I think maybe we were on TV twice outside of the bowl game.
Right.
I've forgotten all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ronnie, man, thank you for coming on Crimson Chronicles podcast. This has been quite entertaining, and